All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Johnny Rush. Just doing a little gameplay testing today. Made some changes like we talked about um, to allow spawning of have multiple items spawn, and um, I also added a respawn option to that so that once they die, they respawn after a certain period of time. Now, currently it's set for 60 seconds is when they'll respawn. Uh, I'm running this game. This is what I did is I created a build of the game, so I'm not running it through the Unity editor, but and I'm running it in a windowed mode, 1280 by 720. I probably could have did something a little bit higher. Let me go ahead and do that. Just show you what comes up. This is the default build settings for a game that you create in Unity. You'll get this configuration window that'll pop up, and so the user can pick whether they're going to do windowed or not, and then what the resolution is that they want to run in. So I could do the full screen 1920 by 1080 and then pick the settings. Of course, these settings, you know, I think they're automatic, but I think a lot of it could have to do with certain settings that are configured in the game. So it can be controlled through the application as well. So let's hit play, and we'll get our Unity splash screen more than likely for a short second. Okay, there's our full screen view. First time I loaded it, it took a little while, but on subsequent loads, it loads pretty quick. Now you will notice, see that lighting just came in. I did notice that shadows are rendering, like as you get close you see them. When you're further away you don't see the shadows, and they kind of come up as you go. Seems to be a certain radius around the player. I can see a circular radius, so I'm going to look at some of the options on the player, and it may be the distance, something I have set up incorrect for rendering shadows. But anyways, let's pick up a gun. I also noticed that sometimes in the Unity editor, when I hit 1 to load that gun like that at his hand, it fails to do that, and I get an error like there's not an instance or a reference to the an object instance, and it doesn't load properly. In the build, it works fine. So it's apparently some kind of glitch in the editor that on occasion that'll happen. You'll get some resources that don't seem to load. Now the builds take a while to actually do, so you know, it's really not feasible to create a build every time you make a change. So if something just doesn't seem to be right, you looked at your code, you think it looks right, you've even exited and reloaded, you know, your project in Unity editor, and it still doesn't load up. You know, and you have the time, you could do a build and then just run the build and see if that problem goes away. It did for me, so very well made for you as well. So what I have here, just so you know, I kept the outer ring that we set up in the last stream or two. We had an outer ring that waypoints that went around this entire area. And what I did, instead of having just one enemy spawn, I added 3, and I spawned a tiger at each spawn location. So they're kind of spread out around, and they go in a circular fashion around the entire trader village. Let me get up top here so you get a better view. And then I took and created 4 additional waypoint chains. I guess we'll call them chains, circular chains. One on the north side, one on the south, east, and west. And I created 3. Each of those had 7 waypoint locations to complete their circular. Not necessarily circular, but it's more of a chain, because I didn't lay them out in a circular fashion so that the enemy, as he's going through the waypoints, will kind of change direction and alter his course slightly as he's going around through them. So I created, and we'll look over the edge here just so we can see. So I created 4 of them, and you see this one down here, the one that's just below us, closest to the wall, is the one that's in that area on the east side here. And so there's 7 waypoints in each of the sub waypoint chains, and then there's also 3 spawn points in each of those as well. The difference between the outer ring, the three tigers that are going around the outer ring, is those are all defined using our old method where we just drag and drop a start point, end point, and set the options and all that. Same way as before, but I just duplicated it, and in the 3 spawn locations I spawned a tiger, and they're all going through the same circular ring, and so they're kind of staggered. Now the 3 on the outside are independent. Each one, the way those were set up, you can still specify the starting and ending point, because I left the transforms public for the starting and ending, and some of the settings are public. As a matter of fact, the enemy has to be public so that you can at least drag in what enemy. Since we only have one, when we get multiple ones, I'll look at modifying that so we can specify by name, and I may do that soon, but I was making one change at a time. So the first change I made was number 1. Since we no longer have all these waypoints under a single nested game object, they're actually under their own. I grouped each one with its own empty game object, and gave it a name that referred to it, to something meaningful for this area. And underneath that, I created two additional empty game objects, one called waypoints, one called spawns, and I tagged the waypoints just waypoints, and I tagged the spawns, and actually I call them enemy spawns and enemy waypoints. And so the code that I wrote will allow you to attach. I created a separate script similar to the spawn enemy script. I took a lot of what was in there, but I created a new script called NPC waypoint enemy spawn. And so on the new waypoint system, this file will be attached to the parent object of the entire waypoint setup there, the group, let's call it, a waypoint group, which has under that the 2 child objects, waypoints and spawns, and underneath those you'll have the actual waypoints that you set up and the spawn. So as far as creating the actual waypoints and spawn locations, those are still manual. They're visual. You set it up in Unity through the environment, and you just add it to that either the waypoint collection for a waypoint in Unity, and so also the naming of the waypoints is very specific, as well as the spawns. You have to name them with the word waypoint, capital W, waypoint, and then a number, sequential number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Based on that name, whatever number appears after the word waypoint, and it has to be, there's no spaces in that, it's all together. That's how the code will sort your waypoints, so that you can, as long as you number them, you can number them. They can be placed in any order in the waypoint empty game object, waypoints empty game object. But as long as you name them, or what I should say, just whatever way they're named is the way they're going to be sorted numerically, and that becomes just it has to be sorted in order to properly pull the correct one and all that for the starting and ending. That's the main reason when those are set. Now you can drag and drop a starting and ending waypoint in there, or you can leave it out, and a starting and ending will be selected at random. But sometimes you may or may not get, as we saw before, you may or may not get ones that are close to make them go through the entire waypoint system. There's no guarantee what kind of setup you'll get. You may get 2 points that are neighboring points, and therefore they'll just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so I left the option to not drag in the transform, so you can still use that if you just want a quick way to get something out there. And if you had enough waypoints in your system, more than 7, you know, you definitely would get some, more likely, some numbers that are random and separate from each other. So the way that would work is the starting waypoint, if they were different than ending, would, you know, go look. It would actually move to the starting waypoint, and then from there the waypoint system takes over. The same as before. You have to drag in the previous and next waypoints on the waypoint controller, NPC waypoint controller. So essentially, it's, I guess the only difference that we made at this point was the code that will properly search and find only the waypoint group and the spawn groups that are within that group, as opposed to pulling. You don't have to tag everything like we did initially in the original way. Every waypoint was tagged waypoint NPC, and did a search on that. Well, I realized as we had started to add sub waypoint systems or chains, they needed to be unrelated as far as the navigation goes. So if we tag them all waypoint NPC, once an enemy got to 1, he would traverse through potentially the entire thing. It just made it easier just to isolate those. So the functionality of the code that was written will make sure it's only extracting the waypoints and the spawns for a particular waypoint system, and basically just the main group, or the main parent object, which is the group object, and the top hierarchy of this waypoint and spawn subchild game objects. You do tag that, and you tag that with a unique name, and then that's the name that you can pass in code. And well, actually, I take that back. You don't have to pass it in as code, because when you attach the new waypoint system, what it does is it gets the name of the current of that object that you're attaching it to, which is the parent object of the entire waypoint hierarchy, and it searches the game objects that are out there that are in our waypoint system, and it will automatically find basically the parent object, and then from there it'll get the waypoints and the spawn. So there's no need to actually set it. As long as you attach the new NPC waypoint spawn enemy script to that, it'll do that. And so I'm planning to automate and make it more flexible, more less dependent upon dragging stuff in through the inspector. So this is going to be an evolving script, but I took the basis for what we already had, since it worked, and little by little we're converting stuff that was drag and drop to scripting exclusively through scripts. Ultimately, the long-term goal of this would be to create an editor tool, some way that we could, through a selector tool of some sort, like a radius or a square, a rectangle, depending on the shape you want to use, or maybe we could even draw out on the map, just an ellipse, a free-form ellipse, for example, where you can draw out an area, and it would automatically create staggered waypoints, like a waypoint grid in that area, and then automatically, set up a starting waypoint, which would become the ending waypoint, and it would automatically connect those in some random pattern, so that you have this randomness, where, and it would once that scripting is written, or once that tool is set up to do that, it will automatically, like I said, will link and automate some of that manual for you. If you want more control, I mean, it's just as easy to lay the waypoints out. Especially in a flat area like this, it was kind of easy. Once I got the height right on one of them, all I did was duplicate it and then drag, from a wide perspective view, camera view in the scene editor. I just moved, I zoomed out and then moved the duplicated ones along the X or the Z axis, and since it's level ground, you don't have to worry about the Y where they're going to sink under or go too high. The other key to getting this waypoint system working good is making sure well, when you set up a waypoint, you have to add a sphere collider to it as well, in addition to the script. And you can leave the default sphere collider setting, which is a 0.5, I believe, on the radius with a scale of 1. That's actually seems to work pretty well here. That's what this system is based off of. But you do have to lower the waypoints, or the sphere collider, I should say, so they're halfway into the ground. So you only have like a dome, half dome sticking out, but you want it that half radius size, so it's large enough that we can easily pick that up through a trigger. The other thing is make sure the sphere collider, you check the is trigger box. Otherwise, it will not work with the waypoint script. And so I guess what we can do, the other thing I wanted to show or demonstrate here before we jump into the actual editor and start adding additional waypoints around the map. Let me just drop off here real quick. Picked up some battles, so we can just my aim is horrible. Sensitivity is just crazy. Right now we do have unlimited bullets, so the reason I'm shooting these, I want to show the respawn. I'm all over the place with this. Yeah, like I said, the respawn timer is set for a minute. So if we just kind of wait here, we'll just keep shooting these. Okay, let's see if we can keep an eye out here. We'll watch this one spawn in. Should be set for 60 seconds here. Should be coming up here soon. Something may have, when I built the program, they should be spawning by now. It was set for 60 seconds to automatically start respawning. Surely a minute has already passed. So we need to look at that. I wanted to actually demonstrate that. There's 3 there. I don't know if we had. I think I just shot 3. No, I shot 5, so one of them did respawn. Maybe the timer was set longer than I thought I had set it for. Because the way it's okay, I also turned off the automatic gold generation and rank up. It says I got rid of that. and I modified the enemy to provide a golden experience value when they die. So each tiger yields 25 gold and 50 experience is the way it's set up. So 25, yeah, that tells me I've killed 5, plus those 3, that'd be 8. That means 2 have already respawned. I'm not quite sure why the other ones are not respawning yet. Again, all I can think of is my respawn timers are off from what I'm thinking they were. Let's just finish these off here. Yeah, because we should have only had 7. I had 3 going around the outer ring, and then I had the 4, one in each of the smaller chains, north, south, east, west. It was a total of 7. So I've already killed 6. There's 2 hares, so you know there's. Oof, took some damage there on the shield. Charge up. Alright, so yeah, I'll have to look at that. It was working fine before I built the app. They were spawning. I couldn't even keep up. But, you know, I couldn't kill all of them before they started spawning back. So, there was always like 3 out there. Kept spawning them back in. Yeah, some of the spawn points I didn't put it like a sequence order. That's why they run back and forth like that. Okay, so they're all killed. Okay, there's one that spawned over there now. I'm guessing my timers are off. What I thought I had set it for, maybe I increased it because it was too soon. Yeah, there's the second one. Oh, and the other thing, since okay, the original 3 that walk around the outer ring were based off the old system. They don't have spawn timers built into those. That was never a part of that set. So once those die, they're gone. The only ones that will respawn are the 4 on the north, south, east, and west. So it gives you a chance to kind of milk this area for supplies. This is mainly going to be the supply area, and you can get some free experience just starting out just by killing tigers. Other areas are going to be set up different, be a different purpose for each area. Lots of meds. I want to get those. Still don't have persistent storage. I haven't really worked on it. Not that it's not like I haven't been able to do it. I just haven't looked at it. Seeing it's like I said, it's Visual Studio, C#, .NET, all that. Although it's using .NET 2, I don't know what was available in .NET 2. That seems to be the base, the .NET version for scripting. So I'll have to see what libraries were available. I've done some database stuff before in code, C#, but it was with at least .NET 3.5. I got to readjust something. When they get too close, they're kind of pushing us for some reason. Could be the gun when it sticks out like that. I didn't account for that a little bit. Maybe I'll just adjust it by a hair and it should fix it. Okay, yeah, so the other two have spawned as well. So yeah, they'll keep respawning. The way the spawn timer works is once it dies, it's unlike our other timer we did. You know, once the tiger dies, um, then the the death time is basically tracked at that point. The timestamp is stored, and then it tracks it from there 60 seconds out from that, from what I understand, unless I change it to something higher. Now in our old, our item spawns, the way those work, they can despawn. Well, the enemies can't. They don't despawn. So the timer system is set up slightly different, like I said, where it starts at timer after the death of the enemy. So that's it for Oh yes, I was wondering if I could do that. So you get to hit it just right. Yeah, nice. Yeah, so the spawning system's coming along little by little. We're working on it. What I want to do today, though, is start working on additional waypoints. The waypoints that I'll set up are the routes that will take us from one area to the next, so each of the locations. The terrain of each location may alter and change, so I'm not really worried about setting up waypoints within those areas, but I do want to set up a waypoint system that will at least take us to each area. And I guess it would be, I'm thinking about, you could run there on your own, but I'm thinking about posting, have like a little billboard sign, like a bus stop sign of some sort, and for a fee, you pay that, and it will basically control your character and run your character through the waypoints to that location for a fee. So it's an unintended run, and possibly will increase the speed a little bit so you can avoid some enemies. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll just make it more of an automated feature so you don't have to sit there and run him through. He'll just keep going, and he'll use a sprint as he has it to get there faster. Yeah, so that's something to work on. The main thing is getting those routes built out, and so that's what I'm going to do here. So that's it for this this stream, I think. Unless y'all want to see, well, I think y'all have seen enough how the waypoints are set up. We did that in a previous one. When I did the very first waypoint system, where I started getting them down, down the main entry, down toward the volcano, and up and around. I'm essentially doing the same thing. But I guess since we're using the new waypoint controller setup, I guess I could go ahead and show you how that gets attached and what needs to be set up just from scratch. We'll do a quick little waypoint setup here. Alright, and we'll take our existing one that we have. I wanted to modify and reuse that one, so we'll go ahead and do that and use the one I kind of disabled it right now, but it's the one that already had a path going. So it's, we'll use that one to create a path that goes all the way across to the other, what will be our secondary and only safe zone area, which will be in the opposite side of the map. So we're at the south, sort of the south side of the map right now. It'll be the north side of the map, which is the will be our marine base or our ocean side town. I also found some, been poking around the internet. There's some really great 3D FBX models that I can bring that are animated, at least, that are animated beyond what the Tiger is doing. There's one that had 12 different animations instead of just 4, and it had a jump, it had 4 different attacks. Um, it had the idle, of course, the walk, the run. Um, it had I think like a taunt, sort of. But it had a bunch of different ones, and it looked like a great enemy that one for an enemy that I can bring in. It was basically a forest goblin, and it's one that I could bring in and set up in our forest area, which I believe is going to be location B, which was the first location we've been testing out. I'm going to make that more of a forest area, and so it's going to have more trees and, well, maybe not more trees, but we might have to make it, variation of trees over there. There'll be taller trees, not trees like this. They'll be a little bit taller. This is more of a peaceful kind of setting, these trees. With the exception of the tigers in here, it's pretty much safe. So we'll start building out another area and get some areas to explore. I know I need to come back and finish up like the building I'm standing on, these 4 corners. Still kind of deciding exactly what I want to do with those. Originally I wanted to do like a shop. And so if I do a shop type setup, what I'm going to do is create just a simple counter that I can set up, a rectangular counter type space with a NPC behind it, and this will be I want to make it where it's reusable, so then I can just put it in the 4 locations there, but alter the type of contents that NPC will use, and maybe even the actual NPC that is there that you're interacting with. I'll get one that has 4 different, use a variation, so each merchant here will have different things that they can sell. So I guess, and I'm thinking, whatever items normally spawn here, you can sit here and collect these and spend time. But it'll be more like, okay, I don't want to spend time, finding these first aid kits, and so, or medical kits, for example. And so, maybe you can go and go to the merchant, and it's going to be a buy-sell trade setup. So I want to make sure the functionality is there to buy, sell, and trade existing items. So each merchant will have a different one. Maybe we'll have one for the an ammunition merchant, a medical merchant, something for the potions for shield to expand that. Right now our shield only does about 15, I think it's 20. That's what we set this little blue water bottle up for, to recharge the shield. So you got to hit 5. The merchants might have, like the ones that do 100% increase, but it would be at a cost of gold, or a trade of, maybe double the equivalency. Like, for example, it would take 5 bottles to make 100%. Well, they would take double that, which would be 10. So if you collect 10 of them, you could trade in 10 for one shield, that does 100%. Same with the meds. The meds are 50%, so 2 of those would be 100. If you wanted to get 100, an item that represented a 100% increase, you'd have to collect 4 of these and turn those in. And so something along that lines. Those are the kind of, I'm just throwing out some numbers there. Those may not be the exact numbers. Also the kind of, I guess, the rarity of these items. I need to, right now everything has an equal chance to spawn. Probably leave it at that way for a while, but we'll tweak that later on once this game is, further along and there's more going on. We'll tweak it. And so initially I think for a while here we're going to just be building out the different areas and putting in enemies that are out there. And each area will have its own unique enemies. So we'll have, like, we got tigers here. When I do the forest area, there's going to be some goblins that are out there. and we'll have some different, different ideas for each area. But once we have all that in place, we have all the areas that are kind of, initial phase one. Let's put it a phase one mock-up of an area like we did here. That's really phase one. This is not. I don't intend for this to be the long-term look of this area. This is just something just to knock out, have a little more room to play with than that small little cabin that we had been using for the first 12 to 15 streams. So I wanted something a little bit bigger. But now that we have a waypoint system, we have a way to move around some enemies. We also have could tap into that, like I said, for our player to allow him to move to different locations. So we'll start building those paths to the different locations, and we'll set it up in such a way that our player can just run for a fee. Initially it'll be free, but I'll work it in, once we get the little billboard set up like a bus stop sort of system. You go to the billboard, which will have a picture of the map, and it'll show where you're at, what destination you're at, and you'll be able to click on a destination you want to go to, and there'll be a different fee based on that. I kind of liked that idea from another game I played, which I'll promote by mentioning its name here, which is Infestation New Z. It's a great, first-person survival type shooter game. They have several different modes in the game. It's a really great game. Fredakis Productions, I think, is the developer of that game. And anyways, they had a bus stop system. The only thing different I'm going to do about theirs is they actually had a bus stop. It's really like an old classic bus stop that you see in cities and metropolitan areas. I'm not going to have that. I'm just going to have a billboard set up. You walk up, you'll have a map, and you just you'll click on it to get to interact with it, get a full screen large view of that, and then you just pick the location that you want to go to, or not, and then it'll actually run your guy there. It's not going to be an instant spawn in the air from one location to the other, which we could do. I mean, we already have the ability to do that, where you spawn when you go out, try to go outside the restricted zone, outside the island in the water. It will spawn you back, all the way to here, to our player location A is where it's set for, which would be further out. So we're going to change that. Also, player location A is going to change. Originally, it was down, further down, so we'll have, it'll be kind of more at the entrance of this area, where inside the gravel area, straight ahead. So you get spawned nearby the area, and then you just walk the rest of the way to it. This way, you're out of the way of harm's way. Let's put it that way. I don't want people to be auto running and they're stopped in the middle of an area where it triggers an enemy coming at them right away. In case you step away, you know what I mean. If you step away from the game, do something different. So, yeah. So let's escape. We'll close this game. Very simple to that. Let's go ahead and launch Unity. Let's get an idea what we're going to talk about. We're going to quickly show you with the current waypoint setup how we're going to use it. Alright, so let's launch Harvest. Alright, so let's go over here. Let's slide this out. Let's zoom out. And so we have this area here. This will be kind of like player location A. Like I said, it'll move from, I think we have it here kind of in front of this Trader Village area. We're going to move it more here or just down the hill where it's outside of any radius of triggering one of the tigers to come at you. So it may be just like down the hill from here. So it may even be, yeah, we'll do that. I'll let you manually run in, so you can just leave your guy standing there. Okay, now the next area we're going to work on is this area here, location B, and that will be our forest. It's going to be more of a forest area. There'll be a lot of trees, different kinds of trees. I'm going to look at variations of trees. There were different ones out there I could use. So we want some that are, I want some of the taller ones to just have like the main bark shown up. But anyways, what I want to do is let's look at our player waypoints first of all. Currently they're under terrain, player spawns. Okay, so there's A right here. So spawn B, we have it right there. So that's what we're going to do, is work toward a waypoint system that connects, all these spawns, and it'll even have some that will go across these spawns as well. I guess we'll basically have like, well, I was going to say we have a player navigation system, waypoint system, and an enemy waypoint system. But essentially the waypoints do nothing more than forward someone off to the next one. So I guess they still can be shared. We'll have different controllers though based on where you're starting from. The spawn, the initial spawn location of, or the start. Whatever position you're at, the player will have. Actually, our player will have a waypoint navigation script attached to him, so that could be activated any time and just have him follow the navigation system or the waypoint system that's been set up. Alright, so what we're going to do, like I said, we have this spawn A to spawn B. So that's where we want to go. Under location A, well actually under NPC, and actually the stone bridge I have here really can just move up here. It's out of the way. It's really not. Okay, so we have this main ring that I was talking about. You see how it's set up. Location A underscore waypoint, and then underneath that, now I did categorize them like I was doing the others, but the waypoint was called enemy waypoint. If we look at north, which is one of the new ones, same thing, enemy waypoint. Well, we changed this tag here to NPC waypoint, whereas that tag there, the main parent, is just location A underscore waypoint. It was working off a different script really, and so the new script I have, number one, it's attached to, here's the parent object that you see. You got the parent object here, and then the two subchild game objects, waypoint and spawns. And inside of those, you have your 7 waypoints, 3 potential spawns, and again, these are set up in a way, we'll see here, where I am, we got an enemy prefab here, tiger. It's all we have to drag in is what enemy do we want to be walking through that waypoint system. And then we can check whether it's going to be repeated in the sprint mode. We can choose that. But we're not required here. As you see, I don't even have it chosen here for any of these, including the south, the north, south, east, or west. I'm not choosing any starting and ending waypoint system. I'm letting it do the random. So when that enemy is killed and it respawns a new one, it's going to be a new random position for starting and ending that's chosen. And so that'll mix it up a little bit. So the players can't anticipate, okay, once they find out where it spawns, if it was the same, you might have a player just sitting there just trying to kill in what we call power leveling, by killing that enemy that's spawning every 60 seconds at that same location. And so we're not going to have that happen. They're going to have to move around, at least chase it down. It will spawn in a different area, and its path will be different as well, because the ending waypoint is never going to be the same as the starting. Well, it could be, but it's randomly chosen, so it's going to vary. And so its route and path it takes will vary as well. Um, Now, within the waypoints themselves, if we compare these waypoints to these, you see they're pretty much the same. You have a sphere collider with is trigger clicked with or checked with a radius of 0.5. Same thing here. Sphere collider, radius of 0.5 is triggered checked. We have the MPC waypoint controller, same controller there. Right here, MPC waypoint. So that's all the same. None of that has changed. The actual individual waypoints you set up, which are the stopping points or the continuation points through this waypoint system, that's all the same. So technically, if you wanted to, if you didn't want to have to add the controller and the sphere collider each time you create a waypoint, you could create a generic waypoint object that you can just drag in. And then all you have to worry about setting is, its position and choose its previous waypoint and next waypoint. But for me, it's just easier to build it out in here and just add the sphere collider, and I'll just add it. But I'll duplicate. Once I build one for a waypoint group, then I'll duplicate it. I'll get the Y value where it needs to be, especially, like I said, in a flat terrain. And you'll see the Y never changes. It's just the X and Z. So from a top-down perspective here, you can easily clone them. Control D will duplicate the game object, and then you can just drag it to the new position. And Control V that one and drag it to the next one, and build your waypoint system really quick. And then just make sure you rename them sequentially 1 through whatever number you have, just like you see here. I kept these other ones at 7 just to be consistent between the 4 areas. And 3 waypoints. And so now looking at the spawns though, main ring, you see using the old spawn enemy script, we're dragging in which enemy will spawn there. So it doesn't have to be a tiger. I could drag in a different enemy that has at least those 4 motions, the idle, run, and all that. Set it up the same, make sure it's configured the same for the same move values. These are set up where starting on your waypoint are specific, so they always start and end at the same waypoint. The only thing they don't do is they don't respawn. This script did not offer respawning, and I realized that I needed to have a respawn. So with the new setup, we expand this out to the spawns. If you look here, you don't see nothing attached to the spawn objects. The spawn objects are in fact they're just spawn locations within the zoned area for this waypoint group. So all the logic is set up in this new spawn enemy NPC waypoint script. So let's take a look at that real quick. Like I said, this will be an evolving script that will eliminate the need to pull the prefab in. It makes it convenient to pull it in, but if I want to have this ability to create this this waypoint from code, or the script from everything from code, all the scripting, if it makes sense. I mean, it may not make sense because certain waypoints are they're set up in a way right now where they have fixed positions that are relative to their parent object. Basically, that's how it was set up. They're all relative to the parent object. So if I were to drag the parent object around this map, all the other positions, the spawn and waypoints are relative to that. And so I wanted to make sure that was set up. So if you want to tweak the waypoint and move it around a little bit, even reuse it in another area that has a similar terrain, you could do that. So and you might have to tweak it manually after that if it's not a flat level area. But the area that we're at and the other area that we're going to work, both of them have flat level areas. So we can use them as is, just move it over, and that'll save a lot of time to really bring in the goblin enemy in that area, and we'll probably enhance it since we have a goblin. We'll probably enhance that script to use some more of his attacks and randomize his attacks more than likely. Alright, so let's take a look at what we have here. All this is similar. All here. This is all similar to what we had before. But I made a note here. I just commented the stuff that's kind of required in a way. Repeat waypoints, I mean, technically it's optional to check that or not. When I say required, it's required that you look at it and decide which way you want it. Because if you don't check it, I mean, it's still going to have a value, which would be false, not checked. Which means it won't repeat that loop. It'll just go one iteration of the waypoint chain and stop. And then you'll have an enemy just standing there in idle state, which you may not want. So that will need to be turned on if you want it to continually move through the waypoint chain. Of course, the sprint mode is defaulted to walk, and so if you want to change that to full sprint or the both setting, which would alternate between waypoints and walk and run, you can do that. Now, the new changes we had, first of all, we added these two. We already had the enemy instance set up here, so we can access it anywhere. But we added two additional lists here, the waypoints and the spawns, because the script will need to identify the waypoints for this parent waypoint system of the game object that it's attached to. It'll need to find its children, waypoints and spawns. So we also set up some variables for the respawn time. And so the wait time is set to 60 for respawn. The starting respawn wait time is initialized to 0, and as long as it's 0, that's set specifically for that. It'll be reset back to 0 after a tiger is respawned. So, but once a tiger dies, start respawn wait time will be set to time.time, which is the game time currently in the game, and then there'll be a check for this respawn wait time. Again, I have it set for 60. I'm not sure why it's taken longer. That 60 seconds seems to be a lot longer than I really want it to be, but so we could maybe alter that, but maybe down to 30. Let's say, let's see if that just pops them up quicker. Although 60s, we'll just leave it at 60. You want somebody using that area just to farm. You want to get some basic experience, but we don't want a bunch of them getting a bunch of tigers and power leveling. So they're just, tigers are out there just to have them out there. It started our AI system, and so they're kind of sparse, and there's not too many of them in that area because it's supposed to be a safe zone anyways. And so the tigers just kind of guarding that area. But the other areas would definitely be more densely populated with some of these enemies, and they'll respawn sooner, and we'll balance that out. So it's not, you want to make each area a little more challenging than the next, and a definite reason to go to that area, like there's something that you need, or it only provides a certain resource or a certain weapon or whatever. So we'll work on that. So not getting sidetracked again. So we have our respawn variable set up here, and that's what's used. And so in our start, we had a bunch of code in the other one. If we look at the original spawn enemy, actually I said it was NPC waypoint spawn enemy. It said spawn enemy NPC waypoints. The original spawn enemy, if we look at the start, so we had all this. We had this line of code here, and then we had all this where it checks if it's not equal to null, and then it does all this jazz here. I just took it out and to make it a little easier to read, and I'm sure I modified some of that code, but we had to modify the check because now we're using a list, which is going to return a count, It's already initialized. It's never going to be null. It's going to be either an empty list with a count of 0, or it'll have, if it gets at least one waypoint, it'll have a count of 1. So we do a new check. If waypoints.count is greater than 0, then it knew it found waypoints. Then, and only then, will we spawn enemies into the world. If it don't find the waypoints, I won't even spawn that enemy into the world. So let's jump ahead to the spawn enemy in the world. And so essentially the code is the same. Let's just compare this part. Let's look at spawn enemy. Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same. There wasn't really anything that needed to be modified there. All we're doing is controlling whether it's spawned in or not, whether we find the waypoints. Because if we don't have any, like I said, if we don't have any waypoints, there's no sense spawning that enemy in. Now, there's an additional check too, that we want to make sure the random spawn index is greater than or equal to 0, because if it's initially set to, or it gets returned back as -1, if it can't find also a random spawn. You know, if there's no spawns that are found, if it can't properly, for whatever reason, the logic or something is set up wrong in the environment, we don't actually configure the spawns the way they need to be, which basically it's just naming them as spawn 1, spawn 2, spawn 3. That's really the only requirement, is having it with the keyword spawn in the name with a number after it, and it has to be capital S. Other than that, it's just an empty game object with a transform, which provides a location, a position, and that becomes a spawn position. So there is a check that, you know, as long as we get a random spawn index from there, and then the spawns count, I just want to make sure it's greater than 0, just in case. Now, granted, the spawn index will be -1. Let's check that. I might not have need to add that. Yeah, if spawn counts is not great. If it's not greater than 0, then it's going to return -1. So, yeah, I probably don't even need to do that, really. Random spawn index is get random enemy spawn. Yeah, it's going to return back a -1, which will not be greater than or equal to 0. So let's, again, I don't really like making these little changes here, but it's unnecessary. It's like an extra check that's not necessary, because if spawn's count is in fact at 0, it's going to return a -1 for random spawn index, which this statement here is going to check, and so we'll know. Otherwise, okay, so we instantiate the enemy. Otherwise, we just go ahead and set it to null, or force it to null. Before, we just had this. We didn't really have that check for that. It just spawned it regardless of whether we had the waypoint system set up or not, and all that stuff. So now, inside here, we obviously had to reference our waypoints list to get that, and along with these, but everything else is the same. Nothing changed in there. So we spawn the enemy into the world. Now, when he dies, you know, if you recall, we had, when the enemy died, AI enemy controller, up here, if it's not as dead, this is where we're doing our move and our track player, but and we show the health of the enemy. It's somewhere in here in our track the player, which is called. Of course, when we're shooting him, we're taking him damage. So as he's taking damage from the player, then that's when he's attacking. But yeah, I think that's set on the player. When the bullet hits, it's applying damage. But what it does is it triggers the bullet once it makes that final hit that brings the health of this enemy down to 0. It is dead is set to a value of true, and so we can check that is dead. And so that's what's used here in the update function. Now we didn't have an update function in our original spawn enemy controller. See, there was no update. It was here. It was just start. Then we had our helper functions: get enemy waypoint by name, get random enemy waypoint, or get enemy waypoints. That's all we had. So in this one, once the enemy died, there had to be a way to check for that. Well, the update function is called, of course, every frame. So every frame we're checking. We have a copy of this enemy instance already saved here. So we're just referencing the enemy instance in the update. We're getting the component, the AI enemy controller, and checking the isDead property that's set there. And so if he is dead, and we want to check that our respawn wait time is equal to 0, because if it's not equal to 0, that means it may have gone. The update may have already gone through here and set the timer. We don't want it to reset this time. It's only when it's 0. And then we go ahead and set, when those two conditions are true, we'll actually set our spawn, our start respawn wait time to the current game time. And so in the next frame, then of course, since restart respawn wait time is not equal to 0, it won't do this part. It's now going to be checking this part of the code, because this is not checked when it's doing this. So and so we're checking. We still want to make sure, okay, is our enemy dead? And if so, and the start respawn timer is greater than 0, which means we've started the timer. Okay, then we want to check, can we respawn yet? Okay, well, if time.time, the new game time, is greater than start respawn wait time, which is what we saved over here, plus our respawn wait time, which we've set up as our frequency, the duration of time that needs to pass. So when this plus this, when time.time becomes greater than 2 of those added together, then we know that elapsed time has occurred, and then we will recall our spawn enemy into world. And that's another reason why I moved that code into its own function, because it can be called in the start function one time to spawn the enemy in, but it's also going to be called in every iteration when our enemy needs to respawn once he's dead. And so we do that, and then we of course we spawn the enemy into the world. I am checking. I'm trying to see if the isDead is ever set. It must be. I know it works, but okay. Anyway, and then we reset the spawn restart wait time back to 0 here. I know it's reset in the AI enemy controller, because otherwise it would spawn multiple items here. Well, actually no, because of this. It sets to 0, that condition never be met. But then if it was 0, it would restart that over, and yeah. So in AI enemy in the start, that's the update. I'm sorry. Okay, isDead is actually set to false here, but I don't like having it out there. So what we're going to do is take this, all these where I'm setting these values, I really need to move them into the start function, which is called when the first time. Of course, anything up there, since we destroyed the object, tiger enemy, and we're reinstantiating him, it is set to false. But I want to clearly put that there because we know other code is dependent upon that value. But I know it was working fine anyways. But just the placement of it, all those default values need to be changed at some point. I'm not going to do it right now. but I will go back and clean that up. And so that's our here's our new spawn enemy wait time functionality. So the update is what handles of the parent object. Again, this script is attached to the parent waypoint object, which has the subchildren waypoints and spawns, and it's a lot simpler. It's getting to be a simpler setup, let's put it that way, as we go. The logic is essentially the same. It's just been grouped a little, modularized a little bit better with a new function called spawn enemy into world, so it can be reused. And we added some additional code for the updating. And of course, if we look down at how we get our spawns now, the get enemy waypoints it's called, that has been modified. And so the first thing it's going to do is going to find a game object with tag NPC waypoint group. So rather than create a new tag for every parent waypoint system or group that we have in here, for example, now this one's not included because it's based off the old logic, so I didn't change the tag. Originally I had set up like I was going to do location A underscore waypoints, location B waypoints for each location, and all that. But instead, if you look, location A north, its tag is NPC waypoint. Waypoints. Those are all the same. These are the new ones using the new script. And so essentially what this, the downside to this script, in order to do it this way, is we're going to have multiple parent waypoint objects here. They're going to be eventually going to more throughout our map. It needs to go through, and this command here, this line of code, it gets all the parent game objects, waypoint game objects that are assigned NPC waypoint group, and stores them in a game object array, and then we define a list of waypoints, WP waypoints as a list, and then we go through. This is where we're actually going through and searching the waypoint groups array. And essentially this is how we identify, okay, which NPC waypoint group is our parent that we're, for this waypoint parent game object. And so we go through that array of waypoint groups we found across the entire scene, and we just do a comparison. We're checking, transform.gameObject.name. That's the name of the waypoint, of the parent waypoint group object, game object, that the script is currently attached to. Because keep in mind, all of these are going to have the script attached to them. But so for its current name, we just want to do a match. We want to find our game object in the scene that matches its name. And so when we do, we get its index. So we store this group index as I. Initially we set it to -1. And then the second part of this code is, okay, is group index greater than or equal to 0? Okay, if it is, then, and I guess we could fine-tune this code, because I mean, really, any of this stuff below here should not occur unless we found our parent group object. I could really open this up and move all this code down here for the transforms in here, because we declare our transforms WP waypoints. See, next we don't declare it. This is the actual one that's going to be returned back, but I won't worry about it right now, because this does work. Because we are doing the check for that the spawns is greater than 0 as well. Anyway, so that's the first part, is just matching up the parent game object and finding its, the NPC waypoint group game object that has that tag that also has the same name as this one. So once we get that, then we have a group index that's greater than or equal to 0 because it's been found, and that's where we then find all the waypoints. Now, because the waypoints are basically what we're getting are using the transform component is what we're using, but the transform is just a just that. The transform is also on our spawns. It's also on our waypoints, and so there was no easy way without tagging everything individually. I'm trying to get away from tagging because tagging takes a lot of time. When you're trying to build a lot of these waypoint groups in your map, in your world, you're not going to want to tag everything. So the only thing we're tagging is there's 3 tags that are required, and it's just the parent gets tagged with the NPC waypoint group to indicate it's an NPC waypoint group, and then you set up your 2 sub-child game objects, and your waypoints get tagged enemy waypoint. Your spawns get tagged enemy spawn for that sub-child game object for spawns. But you can put as many waypoints and as many spawns in each of those as childs to those 2 game objects as you want. You don't have to tag any of those at all. So that's the basic tagging system setup. I try to keep it as simple as possible and consistent. So all the new spawns from this point forward will be set up in that way. And later on, I'll go change the circular ring that we have at the Trader Village to work with that same spawn system, and so it'll kind of work the same way. Although I did want a little more control, I did want to spawn individual tigers at a certain location, and so it may even stay that way, just because I had more control. Using the old method, you have control of exactly, because you're only spawning in one enemy, and you tell it exactly where it's going to spawn to. With the new, it's going to be randomly spawned enemy at a random spawn location within your waypoint sub-ecosystem, if you want to call it that. Yeah, so this little script, this little block of code here, searches through and finds the possible waypoints by extracting out. Really, what we're doing here, we extract all the transforms out, which, like I said, this gets all the transforms, which would be the transforms off the waypoints, the transforms off the spawns, but it also gets the transforms of the 2 child game objects that are tagged enemy waypoint and enemy spawn. So we essentially just have a list of transforms, and it's 13 of them. And in this case, we have 13, which includes, it also includes the transforms that are on the calling object, the waypoint group object, and then all the children as well. So we have all these transforms. Now, how do we determine which is which? Well, we check the tags. We check the tag of the parent game object. So if this transform belonged to a parent game object that had a tag of enemy waypoint, then we know that, okay, this was a this is then a child object, because we're referencing parent. We're only going to be essentially allowing or accepting or filtering by child objects who have a parent game object whose tag is enemy waypoint, and that will that way we know, okay, this is one of our waypoint transforms, and so we add into the waypoints list that we set up above, or possible. Actually, this was defined up here as WP. Those are the waypoints, transform waypoints. And so we pull it out of the possible waypoints transform array here, because it is definitely an enemy waypoint at that point. And we also, while we're going through this loop, since we're going through, we have the full collection of transforms, building the spawn list as well, the spawn locations as well, by checking the tag of enemy spawn and adding that to our spawns array here, which now that is actually defined up top, at the top of our class here, right here. So is the underscore waypoints. Now that's now once we get the waypoints extracted out, then this is where we take the functionality we had before, which based on the name of the waypoint. Now we're going through just the WP waypoints that we accumulated above, and now we're numerically sorting. I'm using the same algorithm or the way we did it in our original spawn enemy functionality, where it's building the first name in the sequential order that we want, starting at 1, and it's going through. Now if it doesn't find one, like if you accidentally misname one and you don't include it, it's really not a problem, because it doesn't break out at that point of the array. It just moves on to the next name. So if it doesn't find a 1, it'll go to waypoint 2. If it doesn't find a 2, it'll go to waypoint 3, and so forth. So if you happen to copy an object that, you know, and you deleted out some of the waypoints you didn't want them, it wouldn't matter. It'll just build that waypoint list from the ones that are already there. So you just have to make sure that you relink the missing ones. Like if number 3 was missing, then the next one from 2 would be 4 instead of 3, and vice versa. That when you're at waypoint 4, its previous transform or waypoint location would be 2 instead of 3. So you just need to manually change that in the Unity editor on the transform game objects. But you know, if one were deleted and you didn't want to rename them all, you could just, it would work fine. You just need to make sure that you update the previous and next settings on the waypoint before and after the one that was deleted to make sure that those are correct. And then it just returns back the transforms list that it builds sequentially here in order, numeric order, which if we go back to the top here in our start, is assigned to our waypoints, which is our master waypoint list now. So at that point we have just in this one function, by calling that, it extracts out the waypoints and spawns, and it does it fairly quickly. I mean, it's not like it's sitting there churning out some time. It does it fairly quickly. If there's an impact on performance later on by reusing the script and attaching it to, you know, literally we're going to have, you know, well, really it's not going to be that many. I mean, again, this is attached to the parent game object, so we're only getting the script is only working on all the waypoints that are within the parent waypoint object, so game object. So it's never really going to have a bunch. I mean, on a large scale, I mean, you could possibly set up, you know, if you set up, well, now if you had one parent game object and created all your waypoints for the whole map under that, and all your spawn locations under that, you could do that. It would work for this. I really don't think, you know, it's going to impact that much, because it's a one-time call. It's not continually calling. It's calling it once and start. When your game loads, when the start function is ran for that parent waypoint game object, it's called one time at the beginning of the game, and that's it. And after that, it has everything it needs, and then, you know, after that, the individual NPC waypoint controller script takes over, you know, managing from waypoint to waypoint. You know, that script is used, and so it's really not an impact on performance. And if it were, it would just be on load time on startup. And I don't foresee that being an issue. But if it does become an issue, then we're looking at adding additional tags and specifically, you know, grabbing a tag, finding a waypoint by tag specifically, and just getting rid of. Really, the only thing it would have to change that would, to me, could potentially affect this is like this here. We get a lot of waypoint groups on the map. We could change it where we pass in as a parameter. You just have to tell it what the tag is, you know, and just find the game, instead of game object by tag, just change this to find game object with tag, and you pass it in the tag name. Actually, if you set up your tags the same as the name of this transform, that actually, well, to be honest with you, that's what I actually could have done. Now that I think about it, I could have just, since I know that the tag, well, no. You would still have to go and tag all that. That means you'd have to create all these tags. And I was trying to eliminate having to create all these tags for all these different, so no, that wouldn't work. Just the way it is right now is probably the best way it's going to work, because it's not based off of a massive tag system. My list is already growing, and it gets to be a pain to have to scroll down through the list, since the list is beyond what the screen can display. I'm trying not to use tags now and minimizing the amount of tags I'm using. If I were to have to go back again, I would rewrite some stuff that was tag-based. I'd rewrite it to not use tags. But it does provide a simple way. Tags should be used only for classification of objects, not necessarily for specific objects in your game, unless it's something important like the player, for example, or a main area. Like you have several areas, you could have tags for those areas to get a reference point, or at least a teleport location, for example, which we're using our spawns for with the player to run from, we're going to use that in the next upcoming streams to move them from one location to the next, automated through some way. For a cost, of course. So if the player doesn't have the money, the gold, he'd have to run to that location. We're going to make it a steep cost so that it's almost frowned upon. You should run to it, but if for some reason you have a ton of gold to waste, you can spend it on having your character automatically run from one location to the next. Alright, so that's our basic new spawn enemy script right now, and that's what's controlling randomness and setting getting a random spawn, and also we're getting random waypoints if we don't set a starting waypoint, which I'm not. I'm not setting a waypoint start and end. I still can if I want to control exactly what point, but I didn't want to do it that way where he's on the same path every time. We make it more dynamic that way, and so I'm going to take away the predictability, and that's one way through randomness, the best we can there, at least. Yeah, so that's it. So that's the scripting. I know I kind of jumped in that, but let's go ahead and build out real quick the script that'll take us to player spawn B there. That's the location we want to get to. So let's see what we already have now with our waypoints, our test waypoints, which we've disabled those right now. Let's go ahead and enable that temporarily. And so starting at waypoint 1, that's all the way over here. So I know we can probably get rid of that. I don't want waypoint 1 anymore. We've got waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 is probably about where we're going to have our little sign where you can click and it'll start running there. But I don't know if I want that to be the first waypoint. Let's look at our main ring here, waypoints. 1 is there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so nothing is near that. That's fine on that one. Let's check our north waypoints and see where they are. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whoops, I went over to the spawns. So that's actually our waypoints. Spawns. So that's not really used as an actual location. Doesn't have anything that triggers. So yeah. And now we do have spawn 2 that's way up there. So for waypoint 2, it's kind of too close. It would be, we're going to get rid of that. Okay, waypoint 3. Now 3 I think is far enough down. If we kind of zoom in here, I believe it's going to be out of the tracking zone of, even if they were to spawn. Let's see. Let's zoom in here. That's that, and then let's look at see if we can probably multi-select. What was it? Waypoint or spawn to, right? Okay, I had the wrong thing selected. Okay, so that's spawn 2, and then waypoint 3. I thought I could multi-select and would show both, but it doesn't. So there's waypoint 3, and then spawn 2 is like way over here. I'm pretty sure that's a good distance away. At least, I think we have it set for 20, 25 or 30 meters is the radius. I think that's far enough away. If not, I mean, there's a little bit of a, if he happened to spawn at that location, because he'll never walk back to that location. The actual walking points are lower than, more south of that. So once he's spawned in and he starts going, he definitely is not going to be within range of the player. So all right, so we're going to start with waypoint 3. Let's zoom out there. Let's just get that to where we can kind of see. Zoom in. All right, so it's probably about the best view we're going to get, where we can see this area and our first spawn point. So we're going to keep the ones that we already have. 4, 5 is good. And now let's see where 6 is. Okay, what I'm going to do is create a let's uncheck that because we're not going to use that. I'm going to copy basically this entire thing. First of all, I'm going to Control D that. And this waypoint will be called, I guess it'll be LOCA _ LOCB, and that's the naming I'll use just so I can identify. Okay, it's going from location A to location B. And as far as naming and all that, it's still going to be named like we did the new ones. You know, with this NPC waypoint group. Or maybe those will be named something specific. We're not going to label it right now. We're just going to get the waypoints laid out. I don't want to name it right now because I need to look at that, because if we're potentially looking at having a little sign you can walk up to and you pick the location you want to go, I only want to pinpoint or show the ones that are for navigation to and from the various locations, not all the other ones. So we probably will have to name it something different. And so we might even take our script and change that up a little bit. We'll see. We might not have to, because again, it's matching it's finding the waypoints and all that based on the tag name. So it don't really matter. So it probably should still work. Our script just the way it is. We're just going to give it a different tag name for these groups, so we can pull them into a destination bus stop type setup. Anyway, so we'll create a new. Let's real quick look at our script here. When it's getting the enemy waypoints. Yeah, so we're doing this right here. Let's get the enemy waypoints. Might have to have a special function. That can pass in the tag we're looking for. Maybe we'll just modify this tag, and based on the value that we'll set that up as a parameter that's passed in. It has to be set. Like the way we're using it right now, it'll just it'll use that as a default. But if we want to override the tag, maybe, yeah, let's just do that now so we can. And I'm thinking we're just going to make it a this will be a string. Just call it waypoint group tag. Alright, and so let's take this, copy that, let's go down here. This is the only place that this tag is actually used, and we'll swap that. With that, and we'll pass in string. Actually, we don't even need to do that. We'll just I'll leave it at that. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let's go back to that. Just Control Z. I'm going to leave it just the way it is. We're not going to change anything right now. Because I'm getting sidetracked. I tend to do that. I start looking at stuff. The focus on this was to just create this new waypoint area. And so this is location A to B. And we obviously don't need, if we look at the higher level here, let's remove the waypoints we don't need. So this is 16. We don't need it. So 16 we don't need. 15 we don't need. 14 we don't need. 13 we don't need. 12. Basically we needed 3, 4, 5. What was 6? 6 was, we don't need that. It's going the wrong way. So we only need the first 3. Here's the other thing I want to do different about these, because these potentially are going to be, not potentially, they will highly likely be a two-way traveling back and forth. but I don't. I'm gonna probably think about a way that we can change this so that that makes sense. So that we don't have to, like, I don't want to have to go in and manually have to keep setting, okay, this waypoint goes here, this waypoint goes, like the previous and next. I don't like the idea of having to drag those in on each of those, the previous and next. It's extra time. When you're looking at building a lot of waypoints, and if you decide to change up the map, you've got to go in and readjust things. What I would prefer to do is have what we call the start, like both the starting and the ending point, which right now is going to be a point. It's this is waypoint 3, but there will be a special starting and ending point. We'll have all the waypoints laid out, which are essentially just going to have a transform component along with a you'd have to have a collider and just check it as triggered. But I'd like to build a special waypoint navigation script that's for the player, that would be attached to the player object, and it works a little bit differently where first of all the waypoints at the start, they're all laid out in the order, like the way you traverse from point A to point B, location A to location B. Well, the first waypoint, waypoint 3, will have an array of all the waypoints for the navigational direction of this player. And we're going to try to keep the player on the roads. That's why we're building it down. I don't want him walking off cliffs and taking shortcuts. We're going to make it realistic, where he's going through the road and traveling. You wouldn't be jumping off cliffs normally. You would take the easier route in most cases. Anyways, we'll have him follow our road system. That's kind of why we painted that on there, is to have an idea of the road system or the traveling we want to provide. And we can go smooth some of that out if we need to. But anyways, yeah, I'd like to have it where you just pass in you just drag all these waypoints in and build an array of waypoints on the very first starting point. And in the back end, which is at location B, it would have a list of the waypoints that would go from B back to A. And essentially, when we build all these other, we have so many locations, so each would have several sets of waypoints built in. So basically, all the logic, all the navigational, that's not necessarily the logic, but yeah, actually the logic. No, I take that back. There would be no logic on any of the waypoints, just the parent, the endpoint, whether it be the front or the back. Basically, every endpoint would have a script. It would be a shared script that they would all have the same script that would contain a list of waypoints from that location to the other location, and to all the other locations possible. And I don't want to have to drag those components back and forth from each, but I'm wondering, there may not be any easy way to do it. It's probably going to have to be manually built, but this way, if we happen to delete some waypoints in between, you don't really have broken links. You just configure it all on the main one. You just fix it there. We'll even have it checked that if there's a missing waypoint, it'll remove it from that list, and then just continue on to the next one. So yeah, I'll have to work that out, but that's essentially what we're going to do. Right now we're going to Again, I'm getting into some other stuff. Let's just go ahead and lay this out real quick here. Let's see, originally I was trying to sort these in a certain order, but since we have our waypoint set up where it's sorting it numerically internally, we don't need to do this. So what we do need to do is define, though, where this location is, first of all. So I don't like it way out here. I like the reference point to be location A to B, so it needs to be the starting point. It actually needs to be what that is, what those values are right there. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We are going to copy that component, go here, and then we're going to paste the component values. Whoops, that was the wrong one. It should have been 3. Copy components. Well, paste. That's the easiest way, so you don't have to type all those numbers in. Okay, so now we have somewhat of a starting point here. Let's see where that actually is. Because I'm not going to have a sign, like, realistically right there in the middle of the road. I want to kind of have it off to the side, but it's something you would walk up to. So we're going to adjust that just a little bit. I'll put it here in the grass. So our parent waypoint will be right here. Alright, so that may have, let's check the Z value. Looked like it was off the cliff for some reason. Looks like somewhere here. So I don't like to, it's just having to do some manual stuff. You know, Gaia, the thing where you do the scene, it has a stamping system where you can just click. It's like a top-down view. You just click and it automatically stamps stuff into there right on the. So yeah, I was thinking about doing something similar. I can already have I know how to use the. You can use vector3.distance to get the distance from here to the ground from an object. So in the y value, basically straight down where you click on the screen. There's definitely a way to get where that distance is, where it's at, and maybe we could create a prefab where it activates something where you can just stamp it and drop it, or just drop it in about where you want it, and then have a setting you click where it'll anchor itself to the ground automatically. Alright, so let's get that in view again. Yeah, just I thought it looks like it's this will be location. This is where the sign's going to be at, basically. I know I'm getting kind of finicky on this. Just I guess what we need to do, I didn't even think about this. This would be a really easy thing to do. Physics, I'm sorry, not a mesh. Put a sphere collider. Oh, that's why I couldn't see it. Let's make something really small. Because that should be the center where that's at. Okay, now why am I not seeing the transform for that? Where'd it go? This is what I'm talking about. Some of the strange things that happen. See, now it's all the way over here. So what was I moving? I must have been moving. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We're just going to start over here. We're going to delete all this. There it is. That's showing. Okay. um, so that'll let me, when I see it goes through like that, it just lets you see it easier. So right about there would be that. Okay. So we've got that set up. So now we can turn that off so it's not active. We'll just use that for positioning. Okay. Now we're going to add in some waypoints. And we'll also add another game object, create an empty called spawns, just to be consistent with our other setups. Now, Alright, so off of here we're going to create an empty, called waypoints, and we're going to add a component. We're going to add a physics sphere collider, and it's going to be a trigger, and we're going to go with the default size, that half size. So we may play around with that later. It worked fine for the enemies. We're going to try that and see if it works fine for our player. And so let's get a Y view here. Let's zoom out. Like I said, I want to change these where if you look at our other waypoints, on the waypoint we had to add NPC waypoint controller and then drag in the previous and the next and kind of link it all together that way. That's great. That was our first iteration. There's probably a need for that kind of a setup. But what we're doing now is here on the main thing, when we add our we're going to have some additional things. So we have the spawn enemy NPC waypoint controller. We're going to have some additional we'll drag what's the starting point and the ending waypoint, and we'll have another Bayesian array, which will be a list of all the waypoints that exist in between those. So everything will be managed from a single script that's attached to the parent object up here. And since it'll be a player-specific waypoint system to go from one area to the next, we may not have a prefab that we need to pass in because it'll be attached to the script will be attached. There'll be a script attached to the player that will allow it to navigate through the system. So I'm trying to eliminate having to tie all this stuff to waypoints. I'd like it to be set up where you just kind of design your waypoints and then you go from there. You drop a script on the parent object and that's it. We'll already have a script on the player object that works with these very specialized waypoint systems that are for player interaction only. So yeah, we'll definitely have a different tag name. This way it doesn't interfere with the enemy ones we have set up. Alright, so let's minimize that. Let's go back to our waypoint. So we have our first waypoint here. So that one is lined up pretty good with the ground. It's halfway in. It's probably fine. Well, actually, that's not going to be our first waypoint. Our first waypoint will be, this will be where the sign will show up. So, and so we have a, for location A to B, we have a sphere collider, which we might leave. And we might go ahead and just, let's put that to 0.5. And it is a trigger. That's going to be where the sign will be. It'll interact with whatever sign we have there. But the first waypoint actually is not going to be. Let's zoom in on that. Let's see what we have there. So our waypoint, our first waypoint. Yeah, I just want to make sure they're about the same. All right, so our first waypoint will then be over here somewhere. We'll come back and tweak these to the ground. What I want to do is zoom out, get our view of this in that area there. Alright, so that's our first waypoint. Let's get there. I'm going to Control D, duplicate it. This will be our next waypoint, which I'm going to move there. So once the first waypoint is on the road, we can probably get him to run to about this location, and then we'll have another waypoint that turns him that way. So this waypoint here will go approximately in that vicinity. So we'll Control D that one, and whoops, moved our original waypoint out of the way. Okay, let's go back. We got this one here. It may just be looking that way, but let's zoom in on that. Why does it look like it's like out of position now? Okay, that's more like, that's what it should be. We got location A here. That's a sphere collider. I don't get why it keeps moving when you add waypoints. That shouldn't happen, but it is. Because if it's going to move every time we do something, that's going to be a problem. When we've got it. Okay, so we're going to get back to that. That's our location right there. So that's fine. That's what I thought it was. Why does it keep moving? I don't know. Okay, so we add an empty game up, create an empty. That's still there. We're going to call this waypoints. Fine. Create an empty. Okay, let's click back here. Okay, we're still there. All right, now so around waypoint 1. Let's move that out here. Then down here. Probably a little more out. Anyways, we got it out of the way. So location A, still there. Still tied to it. Maybe it's because I did the waypoint exactly on the spot and added a under physics, added a sphere collider and kind of pushed it out of the way because of the physics. All right, so now let's look back at this. Yeah, see, it moves now, which is kind of odd. I'm not going to worry about it because this trigger zone is correct. Why it's shown like that, I don't know. It should be shown. It's like the center of it is between these two. Because if I uncheck that, let's see what happens. Yeah, it goes back there. Oh, that's what it was showing. Wait a minute. I'm going to activate this. Look at that. It's showing waypoints. That's what it's showing. Anyway, let's not worry about it. Let's assume everything's going to be in the right place. I never worried about it before, but I just noticed how the parent thing moves. So, all right, so let's get this waypoint right. Let's get it somewhat right. I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this. Let's zoom in. Let's go into the. So we want to bring them out to the gravel zone. And these are going to be sunk in halfway, like we did with the other ones. All right, so that's location A. Over there. Waypoint starts there. That's fine. Just going to leave it the way it is. Okay, so we got waypoint 1. So we're going to duplicate that. Let's go up in the Y spectrum here. Zoom out so we can kind of see what we need to. Alright, so okay, we're selected on what waypoint 1. So it's going to go about here and about there. Control D that. And so we're going to take that from here. Go somewhere around there. Again, it's because we're looking at from up here that may not be lined up over where it needs to be. We're going to readjust. And then we'll take waypoint 2, Control D that. And so we've got 3 now that's selected, and that's going to come about here. We'll have one here. I don't want them really to actually put it about center point there. We'll have one down here, one there. I kind of want them to really walk the path, not really move too much or stray from it. And last but not least, we'll have this one where he comes up about there. Let's see where player spawn. Yeah, put it up there. So that should get us to the general area there. Let's see where 6 was again, down there. 7 would get us up there. Alright, so now this is where I need to go in, and I guess we'll start with our, that's waypoint 1. And that one was okay, that's the one we set. So now we go to the next waypoint. So I have to keep dragging it down until we get it into the ground here. So a stamping system would be great because you know exactly where it was. So this is kind of what I have to play around with when I'm setting up waypoints, and this is why I didn't do a lot of this on stream, because it is kind of time consuming and tedious, but I wanted to show you exactly what I went through. It seems like you're right on the terrain, but it's really not. Okay, there we're hitting it. So we'll do that about here. So let's go to waypoint 2. Let's go to waypoint 1. Let's look at its Y value. That'll save some time. It's at -41. So from our, so let's do that. Let's set that to -41, because now it's going to be at least that. But it's going down even more. So so we go to the Y. Can we change that to -50? -60. -80. -100. Let's try there, maybe. Getting closer. Okay, so that one. About there is good. Okay. Okay, so let's see. That's got to be even lower now. So 2 was at -108. 3 is going to be So negative 110. That'll just save us a whole lot of time right there. Maybe right on the money. Maybe not. That one was kind of on the hill. Let's go to the Y value and see where it's actually at. Where we have you. Yeah, actually that one did not actually go where we wanted it. Waypoint 1, 2. So we're going to slide that over here, more here. So once we start zooming in, we really start to see kind of where they're at. That's probably okay there. Yes, he's down in the hill, that's why we need to bring him out more here. Okay, so that's the issue there. The terrain is not actually. Might just bring it down to something a little bit more level, even though right about here. All right, so we have waypoint 3. Let's do waypoint 4 now. So we'll go up. Because that was a little bit too much. So let's try negative 80. Okay, so that's about close to where we need it. Zoom out, get a better view of that. So it's not quite on the gravel there. It's near the side of the road. That's fine. That's still good, actually. It looks okay there. Yeah, sometimes the trigger points may or may not hit. I think that should be fine. Let's move on to the next. So that one was at -103 over there. So, yeah, so if it looks like it's underground, what I'm going to do is hit Y first and then zoom out because it's probably not even near where we need to have it anyway. So we want it up here on this terrain, more or less. All right, so let's try -90. All right, so we're getting closer. So let's see if we can see waypoint 4 from here. I guess it's up and over the hill. Three, 4, 5. Okay, that's probably good. Let's look at 6. Try to zoom out, see, get higher. Okay, so yeah, somewhere. 5 was where? 5 was there. 6 over here. Seven. Let's see, we had player views there, so this one actually can move a lot closer here. Get right up in this area. All right, so we have our 7 waypoints. Okay, I don't know if we're going to have spawns in this setup or not. Unless we want to offer a teleport option. We teleport from one to the next without waiting. But we're going to add it in there just to have it. Let's see, how do we do those? Just waypoints and spawns. And we're just going to have two spawns there. We'll have spawn 1. Let's add a component to that. Physics, sphere collider. Just so we can see visually where that's going to be. Okay, so that's spawn 1, and I just want to make sure it's not overlapping on anything. It's basically near the that location there. Let's go ahead and rename those real quick. All right, none of these will be marked as triggers. Well, they probably need to be. going to uncheck that sphere collider. Just spawn 2, add component, physics, sphere collider. I'm going to copy the values from waypoint 8, which is the last one. Paste those in here to give us a head start on where to put spawn 2. I think spawn 2 is going to be like over here somewhere. Guess we need to make sure that it's above the center point is above the ground, because if we spawn a player here, it'll fall through the floor. So maybe the spawns just to be on the safe side. We definitely want them above the ground for sure. We'll put the center, really just need a center point above there just a little bit. That way he'll be spawning at that position. And we'll just drop to the ground a little bit. So we can check that off, sphere collider. Let's go back to the spawn 1 and check that the same way. Zoom in. Looks like we're okay there. Yeah, I can see that ring is above, so that's going to be fine for spawn 1, 2. Alright, so we've got our waypoint system in place. So that's pretty much the process to getting it laid out. I mean, that's the first step. Is getting everything where you want it. Get your spawn locations the way you want it. Again, these spawns may or may not be used. If they are, they're going to be used as reference points for the coordinates to spawn a player from location A to location B without having to run all the way through. So, and that may be for a larger fee. Maybe we'll set it up where for a larger gold fee, they can just spawn over instantly. But for a less fee, you just run, taking the chance, because it's an automated mode, taking the chance of hopefully not getting attacked and making it all the way there. It's more of a risk versus benefit. So definitely the automatic spawn will cost more to do that, if we even do that. I just want to have that set up and in place so that we already have the spawn locations laid out and they're exactly where they need to be, and so if we decide to implement that, we can do that. So what I'll be working on is the scripting for this, and so let's pop up this document here. This is what we had planned for the last stream. So what was done was organize all waypoints in the main group and subgroups, which is what we're doing now. We're trying to come up with a consistent design for this stuff. Add 3 possible spawn locations of enemy within waypoint subgroup, which we did. That's for enemies. Write a function to retrieve possible enemy spawn. We did that. Write a function to spawn an enemy by passing an enemy prefab, spawn location, start waypoint, and waypoint, repeat waypoints. And that is something that is it was already kind of doing it. I was thinking of something a little bit different, but it may not work for the enemy thing to be able to do a function, because we ultimately we need to know. You pass in the spawn location. If you're passing it in code, well, you're going to have like a master list already in code somewhere of all the possible spawn locations, and so we don't have that right now. I mean, we don't have all the spawn locations built, so I kind of kept it the way it was. This may be something we'll come back to. And of course test. So we're going to do something similar to this for stream, this upcoming stream. This one we're doing right now is 26, so it'll be 27 for stream 27. Well, actually, what I'm working on is going to be part of this continuation. It'll be for 26, but it'll be showcased in 27. So let's delete all this. Okay, so the first thing, we want to create an auto navigation function to move player from location we'll just say X to location Z. Because I didn't want to put A and B since we've got them labeled that way, ABCs, but since his function will work for either one, so we could essentially and we'll just define what this is going to be, a start position and end position will be passed into the function. Okay, these will need to be tagged with trying to think how we can tag that, because I want to tag basically the start and the endpoints, and maybe we'll just call it endpoints with special, call it endpoint tag. Well, actually, I'm thinking use spawns, spawn locations for this, which I'm thinking that's what we're going to use them for. Spawn 1 and spawn 2 may be renamed to basically spawn with a capital A, it'll be A, spawn B, and we'll be consistent when we set these up, going from each point, whatever the two places are. Yeah, we need to, I want to make this where it can navigate either way. So like if you pass in your starting position, and this may be, I may need to think of this in a higher level because, um, as we build the other ones the same way, we may come up with a better solution. I have to think in a way that, okay, that these are already in place. And so we'd have a, let's go back to, so I can show you what I'm referring to. We have these tags set up. We got a parent tag, of course, location A to B. And we have our waypoints with the points between location A and point B. But then these spawns could be, like spawn A for location A and spawn B. And for each other area, we would have 2 spawns. It would be whatever the 2 points are that go to A and B, and we'll designate them with the same word spawn, but it will be the capital letter A to represent the spawn that goes to the A location, B to the B, and the one that's listed well, actually what we would need to do is associate, what I was thinking, we need to associate a starting waypoint in the group of waypoints as its first waypoint, closest to that one. And so it's either going to be the first or the last, essentially. And so this spawn would be associated with spawn 1, or waypoint 1. And this would be associated with, and then maybe the way we'll name these is we might need to set up some in our script that's going to be attached here. Yeah, the script will have to know that. So yeah, we'll just drag in. We would drag in the, for location A, basically, its starting waypoint. For location B, its starting waypoint. And by putting, and it would have to be one of the end ones, either the 1 or the 8. Because essentially, and we would specify a direction of navigation, I guess. So we could specify that from location A, if we chose waypoint 1 as its start, its navigation direction would be forward. And so it would know, the code would then know that, okay, we're going to sort the waypoints when we retrieve them in numerical order forward. So to be waypoint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The setup for location B, we would say that its starting waypoint is 8, but its navigation direction is backward or reverse, how we want to call that, forward and reverse. And so based on reverse, it would know that when it got the waypoints, it would then start at the highest waypoint number, 8, and go 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in that order. And so once it returns back an ordered list of waypoints, then that same script could control and hand out the, well, basically control the player from there. This would be on the player script, so the player would know when it reaches a certain waypoint. All these would be set up as triggers. And so when the player walks into that trigger zone, we'll work it out where I'm trying not to have to attach a script to the waypoints. I want to keep all the scripting in one script that can be attached to location A and B, for example, the parent object basically, and it just uses the game objects that are set up within it, which is the structured game object hierarchy that we have, the waypoints and spawns, to work with and build our navigation, basically build a node based. So that's some of the coding, I guess, and some of the logic I'll have to think through and work out and figure out exactly how it's going to happen. Because it's definitely going to be a different, to make it universal. We have one script that's going to work for everything. It's going to work different without having the waypoint controller on the actual waypoint. Because the waypoint controller really made it simpler actually, because all it did was hand off, okay, what's the next transform I go to, the next position basically off that transform, and it just had a previous next that was associated with each waypoint. Anyways, we'll have to figure something out. I mean, I think the code can be a lot simpler if we I'm trying to eliminate a bunch of dragging and dropping, all that stuff. We would just have to drag in start element for location A and start element for location B, and go from there. And so I almost think these spawn locations might have to be tagged, because there's only going to be one for each. Well, we already have this player spawn locations for each zone. Maybe those just need to be adjusted. And so essentially that's where it would be eventually walking to. We could eliminate, what I'm getting at is we could eliminate the spawn section altogether, and we're just this is just going to be one-way navigation from point A to point B, so we may not need the spawns. We already have these player spawns already defined and tagged. We just might need to adjust the positioning of those. I'll have to think through on that. Anyway, that's something for me to do. I don't want to keep the stream going too long, just contemplating all this, but you kind of get where we're headed, the direction, what needs to be done. So let's call it a stream here, and that's something I may work on today, and more likely will, but I'll think through it first so I can, when I get into it, scripting exactly something that I know will work. I script it the way it's designed to work. So anyway, thanks again for stopping by. Come check us out on the next one, which will definitely be hopefully tomorrow. If I get all this resolved, we'll have a player that can walk up and just interact with a sign. Probably set a hotkey first, that just to map it to a hotkey, the functionality of activating the walking through the waypoint system. Once we have that working, then we'll build an interaction type thing where you click and you interact and then pick a point. That's going to be a project in itself, setting that up. Anyway, thanks again for joining me. I hope you got something out of this. I know it was a long stream with probably not a lot of talking and all that. It was mainly getting those waypoints set. We did a little gameplay earlier, but it was definitely a variety stream for sure. So let's end it at that. Thank you for stopping out. Hope to see you soon.